My name is Evelyn Marks. I'm 80 years old. For most of my life, I believed the love between a mother and her daughter was unshakable. I carried her, raised her, and gave her every ounce of strength I had. I thought nothing, no man, no hardship, no distance, could ever sever that bond. I was wrong. It happened on a Sunday evening. I was in my own kitchen, the house my late husband and I had built with our bare hands, setting plates on the table. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, collard greens, the kind of meal my daughter always used to beg for as a child. She sat at the table, quiet, staring at her phone. Across from her sat her husband, Martin. He leaned back in his chair, legs stretched, smirking at me like the food, the house, even the air we breathed belonged to him. When I brought the chicken to the table, he chuckled. Guess old habits die hard. Still cooking like it's the 1950s, huh? I forced a polite smile. It's the way your wife grew up. She always loved it. But instead of defending me, my daughter laughed lightly. He's not wrong, Mom. Times have changed. The word stung. I tried to brush it off. I carved the chicken, served the plates, sat down in my usual spot. But Martin wasn't finished. He looked around the room at the old clock on the wall, the curtains I sewed myself, the photographs of a family he hadn't built but invaded. You know, he said casually, this place could be worth a lot if you gutted it and started fresh. All this old junk just drags it down. My chest tightened. That junk is my life, I said quietly. He smirked, sipping his wine. Well, some lives outlive their usefulness. And then my daughter, my own flesh and blood, looked at him, smiled and nodded. The room went silent. The knife in my hand slipped against the plate. My heart seemed to stop. She had chosen him. His cruelty. His mockery. In my own house. I stared at her, waiting for her to take it back, to say something, anything. But she said nothing. She just kept eating as if I were invisible. I excused myself from the table, retreating to my bedroom. Behind the closed door, my hands shook, my chest ached, but my mind began to stir. They thought I was weak. They thought I'd let their cruelty go unanswered. But they didn't know about the receipts. The bills. The secrets I'd kept tucked away for years. And one day soon I'd use them all. Before we move on, take a second to hit subscribe and drop a comment. I'd love to hear what you think so far. There was a time when Nora was the reason I woke each morning. As a child, she had a way of filling the house with laughter. She'd sit on the counter while I cooked, sneaking carrots from the cutting board, her little feet swinging in midair. At night, she'd crawl into my bed after a nightmare, whispering, "Don't worry, Mama, I'll always take care of you." I clung to those words after her father passed. They were a promise, a lifeline. And for years I believed them. When she met Martin, things changed. Slowly at first, like hairline cracks in glass. He was charming in public, the type who smiled too wide and spoke too loud. But in private, I noticed the way his eyes wandered around my home, lingering on the antique dresser Calvin built, on the paintings I hung decades ago. He complimented them, but his compliments felt like appraisals. At first, Nora brushed off my unease. "He's just ambitious," she told me. "He wants the best for us." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that she still saw me as her anchor, not as an obstacle. But the small shifts began to stack. When I offered to watch the grandchildren, Martin said, "We don't want to tire you out." When I baked my pies for family gatherings, Nora quietly left them in the kitchen, untouched. My chair at the table moved further from the center, until I felt more like a guest than a mother. Martin started managing things, for my convenience. He switched my bills to paperless without asking. He set up accounts I couldn't access because the passwords had changed. He told me technology was confusing at my age, and if I just let him deal with it, life would be easier. Easier for him. My belongings began to vanish too. The quilt my mother stitched when I was a child disappeared from the sofa. It doesn't match the decor anymore, Nora said gently, as if that excused it. Calvin's old wristwatch, his pride worn every day of his life, appeared one afternoon on Martin's wrist. When I asked, he smiled and said, "Relax, I'm keeping it safe." And still I said nothing. Because when it's your child, you keep hoping things will turn back, that she'll remember who she used to be. But the moment that shattered any doubt came in the form of an envelope. It was tucked beneath a pile of glossy catalogs on the hall table. My name, my address, but inside was a letter thanking me for opening a new line of credit. The signature was mine, but wrong. Tilted, shaky, a poor imitation. When I showed Nora, she didn't panic. She didn't apologize. She just smiled too quickly and said, "It's cleaner this way, Mom. Martin moved some balances around for you. You don't need to worry about it." Cleaner. That word burned into me. It wasn't just about finances. It was about me. They were cleaning me out of my own life. One signature, one possession, one quiet erasure at a time. That night, I overheard them in the living room. Martin's voice was low but sharp. "She'll sign anything if you put it in front of her when she's tired. We just need her out of the way." And Nora, my Nora, didn't argue. She just whispered, "I know." I sat frozen in the dark hallway, clutching the wall for balance. They thought I was helpless. They thought I wasn't paying attention. But they had forgotten I kept everything. Every bill, every receipt, every secret. And I would use them all. Hang on, before I tell you what happened next, make sure you've subscribed and left your thoughts in the comments. This part gets intense. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday evening. The house smelled of damp wood and rosemary. I had made soup, simple and warm, the kind Nora used to beg for when she was a little girl with a runny nose. I thought maybe if I put a bowl in front of her, she might remember who I used to be to her. Martin arrived first, dripping from the storm. His boots tracking mud across the rug Calvin bought for our 25th anniversary. He didn't even pause to wipe his feet. Instead, he dropped his umbrella by the door with a wet slap and called out, "This place is falling apart. Smells like an old attic." I bit back my words, clutching the spoon tighter as I stirred the pot. Nora came in minutes later, setting her purse on the counter, not meeting my eyes. She looked tired or maybe guilty, though guilt never stopped her from sitting down at the table across from her husband. Martin glanced at the steaming bowl I placed before him and snorted. "What is this, exactly?" "Prison food." Heat rose in my cheeks. "It's the soup you used to love, Nora. The one with rosemary and beans." Martin laughed, loud enough to fill the room. "See, that's the problem. She still thinks this old, heavy food means something. Times have changed, Evelyn. You should have changed with them." I looked at Nora, praying she would correct him, tell him to show some respect in the house she grew up in. But she only shifted uncomfortably and whispered, "He's not wrong, Mom. You make everything harder than it has to be." My heart cracked. Martin leaned back, resting his muddy boots on my table, tapping them against the wood Calvin had polished with his own hands. "We've been talking," he said, voice sharp. "This arrangement can't go on. You're bleeding us dry. The bills, the repairs, your needs. It's too much." I gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady my trembling hands. "I've never asked you for a thing. Paid my own way. This house," he cut in, "is an anchor. And we're not going to let your stubbornness drag us under." Nora and I agreed. "It's time for you to move on." My gaze snapped to my daughter. She flinched, but she didn't deny it. She didn't defend me. She just lowered her eyes to the table, silent agreement written in her shame. "You can't mean that," I whispered. "After everything." Martin shoved a folder toward me. "Papers are ready. Assisted living. You'll be comfortable, and we'll finally have some breathing room." My hand shook as I opened it. power of attorney, transfer of assets, consent forms. All written neatly, as if my life could be erased with a handful of signatures. "I won't sign this," I said, voice cracking. Martin's smile twisted. "You will. You always do. And if not tonight, then tomorrow, when you're too tired to argue." Nora finally spoke, her voice soft and cold. "Mom, don't fight it. It's easier this way." Easier. That word again. I pushed the folder away and stumbled from the table. My vision blurred, my chest burning. In my own bedroom, I collapsed onto the bed, clutching Calvin's quilt, sobs tearing through me until my throat went raw. All my life I had fought for her, worked double shifts, sacrificed, carried burdens she never saw. And now my daughter chose his cruelty over my love. She let him mock me, erase me, reduce me to nothing. For the first time I felt truly powerless. But through the tears, one thought kept piercing the fog. They didn't know. They didn't know about the receipts, the bills, the documents, every scrap of proof I had kept quietly for years. And when the time came, those papers would be the very knife I used to cut them down. From the kitchen, I heard Martin's smug laugh, muffled but sharp. "By next month she'll be gone. And then it's all ours." They thought I was finished. But I was only beginning. Before we go any further, click subscribe and let me know in the comments. What would you have done in my shoes? That night I didn't sleep. I sat upright in bed, staring at the faint glow of the street lamp bleeding through the curtains. My tears had dried hours earlier. What replaced them was something harder, sharper. A kind of steel I hadn't felt in years. They thought I was helpless. They thought I'd fold under their cruelty, sign my life away, and shuffle into the shadows. They forgot who raised Nora. They forgot who survived after Calvin died, working double shifts, stretching every penny. I wasn't weak. I was waiting. At dawn, I rose and went to the cedar chest at the foot of my bed. Inside, beneath folded blankets, were the files I had kept for decades. Deeds, bank statements, tax receipts, utility bills, even grocery receipts I'd clipped and saved. Calvin used to tease me for being meticulous. "You keep everything," he'd say. And I did. Every slip of paper, every line item, every detail of my life. Now those papers would become weapons. I spread them across the bed. Side by side they told a story. The house paid in full, the accounts in my name, the steady trail of charges that didn't belong to me. The forged signature. The credit line I hadn't opened. The draft real estate email I'd quietly photographed. Every scrap was proof. By mid-morning, I knew exactly what I had to do. I pulled on my coat, tucked the most important documents into a folder, and walked slowly down the block, cane tapping against the pavement. My neighbors probably saw an old woman shuffling toward the bus stop. But inside I was a storm gathering strength. The ride into town was long, but my mind stayed sharp. With each turn of the wheels, I replayed the night before. Martin's laugh, Nora's silence, the folder of papers meant to erase me. I clenched my jaw and vowed they'd choke on their own greed. I stepped off the bus at Main Street, the air crisp and biting. 2 blocks down, a modest building stood with a brass plate by the door. Law offices of Clara Jennings. Clara had been a young lawyer when she helped me settle Calvin's estate years ago. Now her hair was streaked with silver, but her eyes were just as sharp. She looked up as I entered, surprise flickering across her face. "Evelyn Marks. It's been a long time." "Yes," I said, setting the folder on her desk. "But I need your help again. My daughter and her husband are trying to steal everything. I won't let them." Clara's expression hardened as she flipped through the documents. She lingered on the forged signature, the credit line letter, the unauthorized transfers. Her eyes narrowed. "You've kept everything. Very good." I leaned forward, my voice steady. "I don't want this quiet. I don't want them to slip away with a slap on the wrist. I want it exposed. Public. I want them ruined. Clara nodded slowly. Then we'll build a case airtight enough to burn them. And when the time comes, we'll let them walk straight into their own trap. We spent the next hours piecing it together, page by page. I signed statements. She made copies. She drafted letters. By the time I left, the folder was lighter, but my heart was heavier with resolve. When I walked back into my house, Nora and Martin were in the living room, laughing over something on the television. They barely looked at me. To them I was already half gone. "Did you rest today, Mom?" Nora asked absently. I smiled faintly as I set my cane by the door. "Yes. I think I'll be ready to look at those papers tomorrow." Her shoulders relaxed. Martin smirked. And in that moment I knew the plan was working. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard Martin's voice drifting from the kitchen. "Tomorrow she signs. By next week, the house is ours." Nora giggled, her laughter sharp as glass. I closed my eyes, clutching the quilt tighter. Let them laugh, I thought. Tomorrow the trap would spring. Before we move on, take a second to hit subscribe and drop a comment. I'd love to hear what you think so far. The next morning, the house was quiet except for the tick of the old clock in the hallway. I sat at the dining table, my hands folded neatly, waiting. Martin swaggered in first, folder in hand, the same folder he'd shoved at me before. Nora followed, eyes darting nervously, though she tried to hide it. "Good news, Evelyn," Martin said smoothly. "We've simplified the paperwork. Just sign here and you'll be taken care of. No more stress." He slid the pages across the table as if he were doing me a favor. I stared at the pen he offered. For a moment, I let my hand tremble, let them think I was tired, beaten, ready to give in. Then I looked up and smiled. "I'll be happy to sign," I said softly. "But why don't we wait for Clara to arrive first?" Martin's face darkened. "Clara!" The front door opened before he could ask more. In walked Clara Jennings, briefcase in hand, followed by two officials from the State Fraud Division. Nora's mouth fell open. Martin's smugness evaporated in an instant. "What is this?" he snapped. Clara's voice was calm, sharp as glass. "This is an investigation. Evelyn has provided extensive documentation, forged signatures, fraudulent credit applications, unauthorized use of her accounts. It's all here. Every receipt, every bill, every transfer." She dropped the stack of papers onto the table with a heavy thud. Nora's face turned white. "Mom, what have you done?" I leaned forward, my voice steady, colder than it had ever been. "What I should have done the moment you let him mock me in my own home. Kept everything, Nora. Every slip of paper, every lie you thought was buried. And now it's your turn to feel powerless." Martin tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. "This is ridiculous. You can't just..." One of the officials cut him off, holding up a document. "Mr. Miller, this is your handwriting. This is your email. And this," he tapped the page, "is forgery." Silence filled the room. Nora turned to me, tears brimming. "Mom, please. You don't understand. We were just trying to..." "To what?" I snapped, rising slowly, my cane steady beneath my hand. "To erase me. To bleed me dry until I was nothing. You let him laugh at me in my own house, and you agreed with him. You chose his cruelty over my love. Now you'll live with the consequences." The officials packed the documents into their case, explaining the charges they would pursue. "Fraud. Forgery. Martin sputtered, Nora wept, and I simply stood there, calm for the first time in months. When they left, the house was mine again. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean, like air after a storm. News traveled fast. Small towns always talk. By the end of the week, Martin's business contacts pulled away, unwilling to touch a man under investigation. Nora's friends stopped calling. Parents at the school whispered. Neighbors turned their backs, and their social circle collapsed around them. Meanwhile, Clara helped me lock down every account, every deed, every asset in my name alone. Nothing they touched would ever slip from my hands again. I spent my afternoons in the garden, clipping roses, the air sweet with freedom. For the first time in years I felt safe. Felt whole. Sometimes when I passed the dining table, I remembered Martin's words. Some lives outlive their usefulness, and Nora's quiet agreement. I smiled to myself. Because in the end, it wasn't my life that was stripped away. It was theirs. They thought I was helpless. They thought I'd sign my life away and vanish quietly. Instead, I exposed their lies, every forged signature, every theft, every secret they thought I'd never notice. In the end, it wasn't me who was erased. It was them. No forgiveness. No second chances. Only justice. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. If you found yourself holding your breath, if you felt my pain and my victory, then I'd love for you to stay with me for the next story. Subscribe to the channel today, and together we'll keep uncovering the truths people try to hide.